right, kia ora koutou. A very, very warm welcome to this, which is our introductory podcast for Kei Cornet. Kei Cornet is a beautiful group of kaiako who have come together to talk about, story and re-story, as Lynn has just called it in our little conversation that we had prior to recording this, where kaiako come together to story and re-story around teaching and children and holistic expression. So, what it all means when that comes together. So, in this brief recording, what we're going to do is we're going to have a bit of a chat about how we've viewed our project, how we see you as using the podcast and the booklets that we've created, and just some general chit chat. This is a really dynamic group, and so all sorts of things drop out of the ether when we're talking with each other. So we haven't scripted this. It's a very homegrown, very organic, very natural project, this one. So you have to take us as we are. So who are we? Let's introduce ourselves. Michelle, do you want to start us off?
Kia ora koutou, ko Michelle Whiting tōku ingoa. I am a retired principal and teacher, although I'm still involved in the education space and supporting schools and my work with a digital equity trust.
Nice, thank you. Alex.
Kia ora, ko Alex Owens, tōku ingoa. I'm a kindergarten itinerant teacher working for He Whānau Manaaki Kindergartens, and I work across kindergartens in Porirua East, and I'm also an across community lead for the Porirua East kaiako, and I work out of Karina School.
Perfect, thanks Alex. Lynn.
Kia ora koutou, ko Lynn Wright, tōku ingoa. So I am currently working for Whānau Manaaki Kindergartens in a 0.2 position as a research and evaluation advisor. Prior to that, I was a senior teacher. So I've been working in early childhood for about 45 years now, and done lots of different things. Worked for Bernardo's, worked for Wellington College of Education / Victoria University as a pre-service teacher, educator, worked for Ministry of Education, did a little stint with Aero. So I've got a range of, and Play Centre is my starting point. So anyway, range of things, still passionately interested in early childhood education, and very excited to have been part of this process, this Kei Cornet. Yeah.
Oh. And I'm Anita Mortlock. I work at Te Heranga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington, and I feel enormously privileged and humbled to have been able to play in the Sampa over here with this beautiful bunch of people. So with our podcast and our booklets, and our project, in fact, what we have done is we've brought together these incredible kaiako across Porirua East. We had regular hui, and Lynn and Alex and Michelle and I were there as well. And we really drilled down deep into some really deep topics. A lot of them were not recorded because, we just didn't think to do that until towards the later stages of the project. But quite often we just covered such an array of really deep, really affecting stuff that got right to the nitty-gritty of what it means to be a teacher. So hopefully that comes through as you listen to these podcasts and look at our booklets. So keeping that in mind, how do you three see people using the podcast and the booklets when they come to this website?
I'll kickstart. I think the key message I think I would really love people to know is to consider the conditions by which the teachers express. These incredible people shared some very deep thoughts, some very natural observations, and worked incredibly hard. And so when coordinating this project, I had to think, how do I make it possible for these people to feel safe enough to express what they are saying so honestly and bravely?
Yeah, beautiful. Michelle or Lynn?
Well, I'll go next, Michelle. One of the things that, as we were doing this work, we explored lots of understandings about what do we mean by holistic expression, and what does whatumanawa mean, and how are we understanding expression in a range of ways, really. But one of the things that really stood out for me as we did this work was the opportunity to come together regularly to talk about what we had been seeing, or what the teachers, the kaiako, had been seeing as they were engaging with children. And I just thought this is one of the richest ways, richest outcomes from this actual work, was the opportunity to be having these discussions. And I thought how wonderful it would be if that's what's happening. And I know that happens in places in early childhood services already, where people have opportunities for discussion, but it's about what you're talking about and how you're talking about them. So one of the key messages, I suppose, for me about how people might be using that is that we are coming to this like we have to be willing to have the conversation, and so we're sharing what we're thinking, but it's really important that we're doing this in a kind of non-judgmental way. So the richness of you sharing your thinking and other people there sharing their thinking, and trying to make sense of where they're coming from, and what's driving that thinking is really important, but in a safe and a wanting to understand more way.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and just to build on that, not much more to add to that, but I think having the focus around children's expression, and actually what that context enabled people to do was to get to the heart of what the issues are around children, and clarify what it is the work requires of us as professionals in order to really respect that, and being able to block out the noise. And I'm meaning noise in a much broader, I'm not talking about the crinkling of papers in the background. I'm talking about the noise that is impacting professionals in their work all the time. And so it focused back in on the children, and respecting the professional responsibility to really get down deep into that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, one of the big seismic shifts that I saw across the project was all of our ability to kind of I take your point, Michelle, to talk about the children, but and I shouldn't say but yeah, and another shift with that was our increasing ability to talk about ourselves in relation to the children. And so, I remember one of the teachers saying, the children, the child is okay. It's me I need to look at right now. And I think for me, that was such a beautiful thing for us and the kaiako to start really sifting through, well, why am I responding in this way to this particular thing? And I just feel like some of the conversations around that were so brave, where teachers were putting forward their mistakes and declaring biases sometimes, and, really, really owning that stuff. So, like, how do you think it was that we were able to get to that point where not only were we, being able to talk about children and children's felt experiences and lived experiences, but also our own deep stuff? Like, yeah, what was it, do you think, that got us there that might help other people who want to engage in this process?
I think just spending time setting the scene where authentic relationships can happen. And so rather than, us coming in and saying, right, we're meeting, da, 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 that natural organic stuff where you ease yourself into a room, you make yourself a cup of tea or coffee, you know that Lorraine's going to give you a fabulous lunch and you look forward to it, and you kōrero, and then you get off script and then you come back to what we're focusing on and reset. When I look on reflection, I think of how important those formative times were for us. And just say, hey, how was your weekend? It's all good. How are your kids getting on? Just those things that we often miss because we're so time dependent. So giving time, I think.
Yeah. I think sometimes we often started a session with some information sharing that was also quite focusing, and people were able also to build on that, and add their experiences, and that's what makes it rich when you can get information about something. It is only information, and then bring your experience to what that means for you. That was useful.
And in fact, that's one of the real things that happened, is that people were actually, while they might be talking about an episode or a situation that occurred, what they really were talking about was their responses and their thinking and their engagement or interaction with the idea or the thing that happened, rather than rather than the child themselves, so what it didn't happen was a blaming of the child for not being able to do something or for behaving in a particular kind of way, and teachers were really thinking about the impact of their actions on children's on how they were creating situations for children to be able to respond authentically or shut down. It was really powerful. The teachers were actually thinking about their behaviours and their impact, rather than this kind of transition to, so I'm measuring this child, what can they do or can't they do. Yeah, really, it was great. Yeah, powerful stuff.
And the information, we had some really amazing expert supporters, like Leslie Rameka and Rongo and Ali, who shared in a very natural way their perspectives on really deep concepts, and became part of the group for the time, so that the teachers could discuss and consider how they might think about some really deep concepts, but not just do that, but share who they are too and their perspectives. So, and that gave really deep information to be able to take away and consider and work within themselves for their children.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing some big stuff here. I'm hearing stuff around a culture of openness and people being their authentic selves. I'm hearing stuff around accepting others in a way that's non-judgmental. And I'm hearing stuff around being courageous enough to have that deep inner reflection. I know in other conversations we've all talked about safety, like what a culture of safety might look like to enable this kind of conversation to happen. And so what advice can you think of? Alex has already talked about the importance of relationship and how, what you're alluding to there, I think, Alex, is, it's those small acts of giving that actually are really important as well, like giving the time. And showing interest in things like that, which I absolutely agree with you. What else might we add to that for people who are coming together to talk about some of this deep stuff and to, create a culture of safety?
One of the things that because I'm thinking, what's useful is for people to think about, how can I manage my behavior? So what triggers me? So recognizing when you're feeling a response that what's kind of happening here, and then being able to just essentially calm yourself down a wee bit if you need, to be able to say, where's that coming from? What's the notions or the values or the ways of thinking or the funds of knowledge that are being drawn on from that, from that conversation, that thing that's kind of triggered you. So I tried to do, when there were things that people were talking about that I was thinking, so I'm coming from a different place there, or my response to that situation isn't, I wouldn't be talking about it in that way, was to just try and say, so where are they coming from? What is driving that? So it was that trying to come from a place of thinking about what's their take, rather than you should think this way. So that's, if nothing else, I think you have to manage your personal self. So because we won't, one of the things that happened in that group is that we all loved and respected each other very, very much. But we were still able to have the kind of somewhat confronting, conversations. But actually, you're not always with people that you love and get on with well. But it's that, regardless of that, if you're coming from I need to be, so where are you coming from? What's the thinking behind that? Then that, I'll agree with you because I love you, is out of the, it doesn't sit within that authentic conversation thing.
I think also it depends on how, each group will be different, I guess. But if this is the first time that's happening with a group, I always think it's a good idea to invite the group to talk about what will help you to feel that you can share your ideas. So you come to an agreed set of I don't want to use what, I can't find the word in my head, a set of an agreement about what is going to work for everyone in the room to feel safe. And that's kind of co-constructed, and it's just there, either written down or whatever, to remind people that sometimes people need time to think. But we also need to contribute because everyone's views are important. So it's like, if you need some time to come back, that's fine. Or if maybe you need to talk to someone before you share. I don't know. There's a whole lot of different ways people need to feel safe. And I think having that discussion beforehand is really good. I just need to be, I've been in situations like that where people say, well, here are the ground rules. And I'm saying straight up, no, don't do it like that, because it used to put me off immediately whenever I had to have that. I didn't feel safe and said, we've got ground rules here. You need to co-construct those as a group. Yeah. And then I think that grows then. I think the culture then develops, and maybe the first discussion is a little bit, quiet and less contentious or whatever, but it will grow if you keep doing it.
Yeah.
It has implications from a leadership perspective too. I lead a couple of other teams in my work, and I've taken the considerations I made in trying to create an environment where people feel they could talk, and I've applied that to other circumstances with vastly different people that don't necessarily always agree, and there are elements of that's worked really very well. And primarily it goes back to what you're talking about, Lynn, is how do I, as a leader, try and listen a little bit deeper to what you're saying, and then you can have more, in my words, regulated conversations when things get a little bit tricky.
Love that. Yeah, it's almost sort of bringing a symbolic understanding also to the conversation so you can drop below layers too. Hey, like you know what I mean by that is someone might be expressing something and you can think, well, this is what they're saying on the surface, but there's actually something else that's happening deeper down. And of course, we can't know, because we're not inside that person's brain, but it might then open up another conversation. We might want to be curious about that or say, I'm starting to get an understanding that maybe this might be a bigger thing for you, or um, yeah, I do know, it just makes me think also too, there was so much value in how we ask questions of each other as well. And I feel like sometimes we were sort of yeah, there were two things for me that kind of have dropped out of this conversation that we're having now that I remember in our hui. And one of them was a thing that you've talked about, Alex, which is the value of silence. Sometimes a teacher might say something and we just sit with that story, even if it was just for a slightly extended moment. And it was like the teacher could hear their story that had come out of their mouth, and they immediately could pick things up in the story that they might not have consciously thought of when they said what they had said. And so then there'd be an elaboration, or they would actually drop down into that deeper place. And it makes me think that sometimes it's so dynamic, this kind of way of expressing, and we're not stuck in one particular moment necessarily when, the conversational, what do I want to say, the norms, when that kind of norm around speaking allows that flow to happen and do all those sorts of things. And then so as well as that kind of silence and that pause, which is really valuable. The other thing I was thinking was just some of the questions that the teachers asked each other and which we asked and they asked us were just so good because they weren't coming from a place of judgment or assumption. They were quite often coming from a place of curiosity and a desire to understand. And then that sort of held something else up, that could be discussed further. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. But I'm also making it sound like it was a them and us project, like us as the research team and them as the kaiako. And it wasn't like that, was it? It really wasn't
No,
like
definitely not.
that.
Because those questions weren't pre-developed. They flowed out of the conversation, and we were all sharing equally, if you know what I mean, in terms of our experiences and
Yeah.
who we were about
Yeah.
ourselves. So very
And
much.
that's so true. And over time, the trust that everyone would be respected by all people that were in that room made that easier to do. When I sort of hear what you're saying and what you're saying, Anita, we developed really strong culture of trust between us, no matter who was doing what your role was, whether you were facilitating or coordinating, or we all had something to share and trust that others would listen.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Well, this seems like a really good place to pause our ongoing conversation for now. And well, yeah, so to people watching this and listening to this, you'll notice that our other podcasts are just audio. And we've done that deliberately to protect the teachers. One of our ethical undertakings is there a certain element of anonymity that we wanted to protect, even though the teachers were very open. But we wanted you to meet us at least. So kia ora, this is us. And and we really hope that you enjoy this series. You'll see that there's an email address, so we would love to hear any comments for how you're using it, what you're finding useful, and things like this. So yeah, be in touch. We would love that very much, and we wish you luck as you go through this journey. And yeah, well, the very, very best to you, Mori Ora. Any concluding comments from you other three beautiful, beautiful people?
Just enjoy the podcast. They're very real, very natural. You'll have a giggle, and you'll also get to hear some really in-depth reflections. Yeah, enjoy them.
And the thing that I did want to say is that actually what happened in our discussions was really what we were exploring in this in this work. So they were, the discussions were about what people were expressing and how they were expressing them, where they'd come from. And so all of those, all of the, the who am I and yeah, where have I come from and what do I value is actually that's what happens with children, the same as with teachers or with adults. So we're not, we're about learning stuff, but actually that learning stuff happens within a context of self and interactions and relationships. And that's what happened in these meetings, in these hui. And that was the value, really, I think, about what we're doing.
Can't add any more to that.
Perfect last words, Lynn. Can I pull them out and put them as a quote in the booklet?
You can. You absolutely can.
Fantastic. All right. Well, let's say ka kite anō, and we wish everybody all the very, very best.
Yeah, and go ahead and enjoy.
Bye. Kia ora, ka kite.
Ka kite.